Welcome, everybody, to Spirit Matters, your daily Bhakti Center podcast. I'm Dayal here along with Kishore Chandra and Achyuta Gopi. And we're so glad that you're here. Welcome from wherever you're tuning in from. We have our live virtual studio audience here with us, blowing up the chat board with good mornings and hellos and happy Fridays. And wherever you're tuning in from on your podcast platform, super, super, super glad that you're here just to tune in. And we just check in. We're here to check in with each other every morning. How often do people check in on you, or do you check in on other people? It's not very often or often enough. And we're here just simply to know that we're checking in on you. And we're checking in on each other because we need it. And we love you. And I love these two people, Achyuta Gopi and Kishore Chandra. How both you doing?
Good. Better. Getting through it.
Good, better, and getting through it. Sounds like a progression there.
I'm
Kishore,
also I'm also good. Much better than the beginning of the week. And I'm on day 4 of my juice fast. And it's really interesting to see the mind. This morning I woke up
mm,
and I was like, I need food. I was like, you know what?
yeah,
Yogi Char does like 40-day water fasts. I can do a juice fast. It'll be fine. So I'm good.
yeah. Days like 3 and 4 are like the hardest. Because day 1 and 2, you're like, this is exciting and like, woo. And then like day 3 and 4 is like, and then after that, like when you hit like 6 or 7, if you're really going for it, like you really catch a stride and it's just like, I can do this. Like you kind of like your body acclimates. But like day 3 and 4 is just like the emotional, we don't realize how emotionally comforted we are by the food rather
Mm.
more than just like physical hunger. It's an oral fixation, something we do multiple times a day that we turn to. So I saw you yesterday with a big, I don't know, what was it, carrot juice or something. all all the best. I had dumplings for dinner last night. All the best to you. um
But
what's on our minds?
it is really interesting that you brought up the comfort that we receive from material things, because I think that's a doozy. And I feel like knowing your specific relationship with specific material things that bring you comfort is something that's really important, actually, because then you start to know yourself a little bit more. And because I think what's really scary is when the thing starts to have control over you and you lose any sense of, maybe not the word control, but any sense of boundaries around it. And it's just like, I've eaten this whole cake by myself or something like that, you know? I don't know if any of you have ever had these nights, but this is what kind of launched me into I was already planning it. I already knew that I wanted to do it for the spring and the equinox. And for my body type, it's good. I don't recommend it for all body types, but kapha. Um, I ordered something on Seamless and I was so mad. I was so mad because it was just like I had this moment afterwards where I was just like, material world sucks. Like this is BS. I got 3 things and it was like $50 and none of them were good. And they were all not so healthy. And I was just like, this is terrible. And I had this like moment where I was just like, this is the material world, you know? It's like we invest so much and we think we're gonna get something out of it. We think we're gonna get some sort of enjoyment out of it. And actually it's always not, you know? And it might have like a semblance of temporary enjoyment or something. But yeah, I want to hear your thoughts on this, on deriving pleasure out of our material objects.
It's a material world, you pay for misery. Also sounds like you're on a really deep like fasting thought, like food is just such a concept that is filled with misery, and we just need to like let go of everything. It's like, says the person who's drinking carrot celery juice for the last 92 hours.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that we started off with like we don't really understand or acknowledge just how much comfort. I was like, you sadhus do not. I have always known. Me and food, we have such a tight connection, and I'm one of those people. I'm like, look, even it, because I will admit I often forget to eat. Now that's something else. But I feel like I've followed so many rules and regulations in my life. Okay? Food is the last thing I have left. Don't mess with my food. It's like even if I'm gonna do some tapasya, like the option should always be there. It's all I have. And so I remember one time I was actually heading to the Bhakti Center for Thursday night kirtan. And I was like, I should just keep going. I was like, actually, I'm really hungry though. And so I went and I like tracked down some gluten-free cafe and I bought one muffin for $7. And I bit into it, and it was made from the flour of tears of disappointment and desert sand. That is the only way I can describe that muffin. And I was so mad that I had paid $7 for this thing and you know that like when you're really hungry, okay, just about anything would be good, but not that. I think I cried that day in kirtan, and people might have thought that it was ecstatic symptoms, but it was me lamenting that gluten-free muffin.
And Cheetah singing with such emotion. My God, she's so advanced.
Yeah.
Dear Lord, look at that woman cry. And there's a desert sand muffin wrapper sticking out of her pocket.
Oh, I was so angry.
I appreciate. I mean, for me, I appreciate where you're going in the sense of almost what we the what I'm thinking of is the way that our standards adjust according to our levels of desperation. Whether it's with food, whether it's in relationships, whether it's in career, whether it's in the way people treat ourselves. And I always go back to relationships because that's what people talk to me the most about. And in the idea, and you meet, people all over, it's very common that anybody you talk to who's single is looking for that relationship and wondering why they're alone. And anybody who's together is like wondering, did I choose the right person? And like, should I still be in this relationship? Everyone who's single is thinking about, I need to get in a relationship. Anyone who's in a relationship is like, should I be in this relationship? Did I find the right one? It's just like people don't realize, like, you all need to come to a conference somewhere and just like let each other know that like happiness is not on the other side of whatever it is that you're looking for it. Pasha says she's happily in love as she sits next to the person she's in love to. Yes, Pasha, good job. You should say that. It's not what you told me yesterday when we were talking. Anyways, I was joking. But this idea that we adjust our standards of living according to our levels of desperation. And so, if I'm really hungry, I will settle for something a little bit less, unless it's a tears of disappointment desert sand muffin. And I think also in terms of relationships, loneliness oftentimes lowers our standards of what we allow other people to treat us as, or where we seek quote unquote love in a relationship, and the justifications we use for inappropriate behavior. And I think a huge part of spiritual life and in my own journey is knowing what is actually appropriate or available, and not settling for something less just because I feel like I'm in a desperate place. And something like I love, there's that, I think Rabindranath Tagore, however pronounce his last name, says that hope is the song of the bird in the darkness just before the dawn. And so hope is a bird that is experiencing the darkness just before the dawn, but sings its song knowing that, daylight is just around the corner. And so I think that sometimes when we're in our darker moments, we lose sight of what's really available to us, and we kind of lower our standards, and then we end up eating desert sand muffins.
And something that's really interesting about that too is that when we're in our darker moments and we end up eating the sand muffins, it's I don't want to like be the person, and I don't believe this actually, that like, poo-pooing on our coping mechanisms in those dark moments. Like that's fine. Like having a coping mechanism in your dark moments is like totally okay. If it's a good muffin, if it's a desert muffin, like it's fine. Well, I think what becomes a problem is when whatever it is that we're using as a coping mechanism in those dark moments for somehow surreptitiously starts to become the norm, and we don't realize that we're actually like constantly living in a like trauma state, like dealing with the world. That's when it becomes a problem, because I think a lot of people have that problem actually. I think a lot of people, I mean, I think the world is a traumatic place right now to live in just in general, but everyone's suffering from something. Everyone's suffering from some disorder. Everyone's suffering from something in their past, and they've had to do things in their past to protect themselves, to um give themselves a sense of comfort, whether that be through food, whether that be through whatever, we don't need to go into all the ways. And I think that there shouldn't be any judgment on that, whether it's me judging myself or society judging me. It's like I had to do what I had to do, like leave me alone. And I think it's more about, okay, that happened 2 years ago, 5 years ago, whatever. How am I growing from that? Or am I still somehow stuck in that like cycle? Like when I get a trigger of, I don't know, whatever it is, right? Abandonment or whatever issues we're all dealing with. Do I like run straight to the food? Do I run straight back to the X? Do I run straight back to like the app? Do I run straight back to the thing? And I think that's where it really starts to help us see a little bit more about, like, it might, in the sense that we're not judging the behavior as bad or good, but that behavior had a context. Does it serve my context now? Does it serve me where I am now or not? And I think that that's a really healthy way of looking at things and moving on from those coping mechanisms.
Let's hear it, Chuta.
Yeah, let's hear it, Achuta. I saw you
No, it
doing all
just
this.
yeah, I really like that point. And my sister often, and usually with like, like you've said, like trauma based ideas and ways of being, we usually think about it that way. But I haven't necessarily so much thought about it in terms of using those more innocent coping mechanisms. Like you always think of the really really negative ones, or the really really bad ones, or the ones that are totally negatively affecting your personality. You don't think about those small small habits that it's like, oh, I just need this to get by. And Mrs. like, okay, now we're by. You've bypassed that. Now what? So she's always challenging. Don't let your coping mechanisms become your reality, your new way of being. Like you said, there was something that you needed. It served its purpose. It was like, it's like we look at so many different things in the Constitution. You're like, well, that was for war times. What's for what happens when you're not then? Like we have to allow these patterns and even habits in our lives to have cycles, which, I will say I see the good idea behind your juice fast, even though it makes me sad for you.
Yeah.
But it's good for us to have these patterns in our lives of things that this served its purpose and now we can cycle it out and still usher in something new and better.
Yeah. I was thinking of there was an article I read a long time ago from Glennon Doyle before she started her podcast and wrote all her books, and she used to just write blogs. And there was one blog she wrote about, because she's openly a recovering alcoholic, drug addict, bulimic. She's had food addictions of all sorts. And one of the things she struggled with was food addiction with bulimia. And she has a very just naturally thin constitution, and she was writing all these very vulnerable blog articles, and one person would write into her sharing, Glennon, you talk about all this stuff, but then I also like vulnerability and accepting yourself, and at the same time someone's writing in like you're a very thin and what many people would deem as a beautiful woman, and it seems like it's easier for you to kind of like share these types of things. And some people are also saying it seems like, maybe do you people would wonder, do you still struggle with your food addiction or this or that? And she would share in her response, I'm a recovering, you know bulimic, alcoholic, drug addiction, etc. Those things used to be my armor, you know, drugs, alcohol, food, etc. She said, now my armor is nail polish and makeup. And I think that's a huge step up, and I'll take that. Like I like feeling good about myself. I like looking good in front of other people, which just recently, this article was probably written maybe even, I don't know, 10 years ago. Recently, she went on the Ellen DeGeneres show, and it was a big thing. She wore no makeup, and she was just like, I'm just coming out as I am. And it was a big statement, and everyone was like, yes, thank you. And she's just like, she's shifted. But the point, even in that article, was like, as you were saying, Kishore, like the coping mechanisms we have now is, when you look at something in and of itself, we can judge it in a certain particular way. When we look at something in the context of our journey and how we're growing and progressing, then we're able to look at things more compassionately, more maturely, with a more 360 view. And rather than saying, oh, this is good, this is bad, like eating, whatever this is, or, whatever it may be, because what happens is we judge ourselves to this highest standard that is beyond attainable for any one individual person, and we think everything I'm doing is bad, or I shouldn't be doing this. But it's actually like, it's important for me. I love this term that Richard Rohr coins, our narcissistic fix. And that if we don't have some sense of like satisfying that gnawing sense of ego in this life that tells me like I'm okay, I'm a good person, I'm respectable in some basic level, things just get really weird, and it starts to bleed out the side of all that we do. And we start kind of like just trying to squeeze it from really weird places or people in really weird ways. And it's like, if I can find a way to find a little bit of armor that feels good to me, so I can go out into the world as a somewhat integrated person, not feeling depleted, not feeling like I'm on edge, and not feeling like I need to squeeze it out from other people, like that's a healthy way for us to approach life, or even our spiritual life. It just takes a lot of maturity and acceptance to realize what we need. I remember one of my spiritual teachers very early on, when I was living as a monk, and I would like live in this place of like, I don't need anything, and like I shouldn't ask for anything, and I'm just here to serve, etc. And he says it's not, we use this word Maya, or like illusion, or like, material ingratiation. I don't know if that's a word. Material like gratification, like to take what you need to be happy and inspired in your spiritual life, you know? And so I think that just requires tremendous acceptance and maturity. And it's something that I grow with tremendously. And I found that what I found, and I'll wrap it up here, and you guys can respond, is that that's a line that you have to draw for yourself, and you have to learn to be comfortable with. And it's like, when you're lying to yourself, when you're making excuses for yourself, and what you like need in order to just kind of, and it's not something that you even need to like check and balance with another person. It's like, what do I need in order to just kind of be comfortable and stable in order to move forward, knowing that I'm trying to progress. And it's like a constant line that I'm balancing for myself. And it's a constant like figuring that out and checking in about like, how can what are the things I need to give to myself in order to like be able to function, without, because it's like, okay, well, I shouldn't, do this. Was then I don't do this. And then it's like, you go over the edge, like I'm going to fast because I should fast. And then you fast for 12 hours, and then like you binge on potato chips and, whatever it may be. And it's like, well, maybe I just should have eaten breakfast. And so it just depends for each person.
And I think that's a really beautiful point that you just ended with, that it depends on each person, because you were speaking about, how we judge ourselves and how we see ourselves versus, juxtaposed to society and all these societal norms and etc. And that's why I really love, I mean, we don't need to get into it right now, but I really love Ayurveda so much. I mean, I don't follow it to the T, but just this concept that like different bodies need different things. I'm like, huh, that sounds so nice. Like I believe that, it's like that means that I my ideal version of health in my body is going to look different than Doyal's, and it's going to look different than Achuta's. And I think that that's such a really important concept for people to have. And I think people are slowly starting to like get it into their heads, but I think it's going to take a while to like really get it ingrained. It's going to take a lot of practice to, because we grew up with seeing all these like images of, beauty and 90s and early 2000s of like what the perfect, person is supposed to look like, what the perfect couple is supposed to look like, what the perfect life is supposed to look like, and all of this stuff. Like that's what we grew up with. And I think just maybe now in the past 10 years, there's a little bit more of like, no, it could be this way. No, it could be that way. No, I want to, all these kind of different movements that have happened. And I think that's important for our physical health, our mental and emotional health. And I love that you brought in the point, Dayal, about spiritual health, because in spiritual life, that's a whole nother doozy, of just like, what does a perfect bhakti yogi look like, and what does a what does a perfect, devotional life look like? It's such a
Yeah.
dangerous place to tread in, because it really sets you up in a place where like, okay, now I've done the perfect, it sets you up for a lot of misery, in my opinion, because, oh, I've done the perfect thing now. So either you're going to go into the ego and start judging other people for not doing the perfect thing and not being as quote unquote perfect as you, or you're going to do the perfect thing and get bitter because you're like, okay, I'm perfect. Why isn't it happening? Why haven't I reached enlightenment? Like, what is it, and you'll just sink down into the spiral. And so it's really not the best place to, and we see it a lot in spiritual communities and in spiritual life, of people fitting the mold of what it means to be a spiritualist or something like that. And I think that's something that I really love, and I'll end here because I want to hear Chuta. I really love about the Bhakti Center, and I love about Bhakti Center being in New York City. If you ever go to a kirtan on Thursday night, like you literally see everyone from every walk of life in that room, and it's just like, cool, this is awesome. And they're all practicing, this beautiful spiritual practice, and they're all engaging, they're all giving their hearts, and it's just like, wow, okay, it's really a testament. Like it doesn't matter, it doesn't have to look a certain way, like you can be wearing this clothes, you can be from this walk of life, and you can still come and participate and be a spiritualist. So I wish there was more of that and less of the like high and lofty, spiritualist thing. But I want to hear from you, Chuta, because I saw you nodding and laughing.
No, yeah, I've always appreciated that. Really, truly about the Bhakti Center, and the determination to adhere to that kind of like welcoming policy as much as humanly possible. And I have really really liked that about Ayurveda, that there are no, and even within, you've got three categories, but you've got so many different constitutions that they have kind of accounted for so many variations to really understand that each person is still unique. And that I really like, and I feel like part of the problem is in making it more approachable, both with like medicine, spirituality, all of it. They try to kind of bring it down to I guess lowest common denominator, but then that's just what gets perpetuated, and that's what keeps cycling around. And I think that that happens also, like we said, with spirituality. But what I love is there's one section, Mahabharata, where Krishna goes to see the Pandavas, and he asks Yudhishthir about his kingdom, and one of the things he asks is, are you happy? Are your people happy? And that was big, because I feel like so many people are like, well, I'm going to fit this mold, and I'm going to do this thing, and I'm going to do that, and I'm going to make this austerity, and I'm going to make that sacrifice. And at the end, it's like, well, and then, I lived for 12 years as a monk. And I'm always like, but are you happy? Were you happy? Because if not, I mean, our goal was supposed to do the devotional service joyfully performed. Like, are you happy? And if we're not, then let's be real and honest with ourselves and then figure out how to be a healthy, happy spiritualist, Ayurvedist, whatever you decide to do. I feel like our divine person, really what they care about is like, are you happy though?
Hmm. Srila Prabhupada would say often, chant and be happy. And, we normally think chant, and as a result of that, be happy. Like he sure said, I'm doing everything, I'm doing it perfect. Why aren't I happy? But I think also there's a responsibility for us to see the happiness part as our own separate responsibility in a way, to like chant or do your spiritual practice, and also make sure that you're arranging your life in such a way that you have a baseline of happiness. Take care of the things that you need to in order to, because it's a long haul. It's a long haul in the sense of us making our spiritual journey. And we need to make sure that we can sustain whatever it is that we're doing and find a base level of comfort for us to be able to stick around long enough for the process to work. And so I think that we try to rush things so quickly, or we think, okay, like we kind of treat spiritual life as this material formula. Like once I put all the pieces together like a Rubik's Cube, it fits together and everything is done. It's like, no, it's not like once you get all the pieces in place, it's like, this magic light shines out from your head and you like receive some like euphoria of experience. It's that, when you apply yourself daily over the course of, that's what we were just studying. We just finished our online yoga teacher training and we were looking at the Yoga Sutras, and it mentions that, spiritual practice, when it's performed consistently over extended period of time, you see results. You see results when it's performed consistently over a period of time. And in order for us to be able to do that, we got to make sure that like our ducks are in a row in terms of like find a comfortable seat, make sure like, that your base levels of like comfort are taken care of so that you can continue to perform that. And so, that question of like, am I happy, is a powerful one. I remember when I first started exploring spiritual life and in Krishna consciousness and reading the Bhagavad Gita, and I was 18 and I was living at home still. And, I was exploring all these new realizations that I wanted to move into a temple and like dive into spiritual practice, but I was still living at home and I was figuring things out. And I'd get into arguments with my stepdad about whether it's vegetarianism or this or that or the other. And at a certain point, like he just asked me a question that really just like cracked something open. He was like, he's like, I thought you're supposed to be happy, because I'm talking about all these changes and I'm realizing like, I was sort of like on edge, I was like on edge, and here I was getting into arguments, and I recognized like, wow, I'm doing all these things, I'm chanting and I'm like preaching this philosophy and I'm doing all these things, but like I'm getting in arguments with people and I'm resentful and I'm like ready to like try to prove somebody wrong. And I was like, I'm not feeling happy. And I was like, whoa, I need to really shift the way that I'm approaching this. And I think it's a great question. I think it's a great question that we don't ask ourselves enough. And when we don't ask that question, we usually allow ourselves to get into a place of it goes on for too long. It goes on for too long where I allow myself to be unhappy for too long. And then I start blaming other people. And I give up the process or I get resentful. And it's like, don't let yourself be unhappy for too long. Kimberly, what do you got for us for some takeaways? My video's lagging here for some reason. I'm trying to turn it on and off. My video's lagging, isn't it? You see that lag? I'm not sure what it is. Technology. I think it's maybe technology's way of telling me to pipe down, be quiet. Kimberly, you got some takeaways for us?
Yeah. Different bodies need different things Take what you need and find your armor that keeps you nourished and inspired in your life. Arrange your life in a way that you have a baseline of comfort and happiness to make your spiritual process work. And lastly, we need to ask ourselves if we are happy and if we're doing our service joyfully.
Lane says, don't become the desert sand muffin in your own life. Kishore's laughing. He's laughing because he's on a carrot juice high. He's like, desert sand muffins. Yeah, I'm drinking carrot juice. Love you guys.
Right, it turned into a gremlin.
Turned into a gremlin.
I'm drinking carrot.
All right, guys, we've officially lost it. We tried to keep it together through most of the episode, but the cork has come out. Kishore Chandra is crying carrot juice. Celery juice is coming out of his eyelids. He's losing it. We love you guys so much. Thank you all so much for being here. Please, it's Friday, so we're taking the weekend off. We'll see you back on Monday. If you haven't yet, please rate or review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you can rate and review. We'd love to get a 5-star rating from you and leave a review about what you appreciate about the podcast. It really means a lot, and we love to read them and hear from you guys. So please be well, take care, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.